Hey everybody, this is Fractions Lesson 9-5, and we have talked about fractions so far. Of course, defining what a fraction is, that a fraction is a part of a whole. We've also looked at examples of fractions. We've been able to name the top number and the bottom number, as well as being able to tell what the bottom number means, as well as what the top number means. And so, first of all, let's start with our essential question that you see behind me in green. And the question is, how can you find a fraction on a number line? So we're going to be looking at fractions on a number line today. Before we actually look at the number line, I want to show you a piece of paper. I have a yellow piece of construction paper here, and this represents our whole unit. So before we do a number line, let's look at a model for us real quickly. So if I were to take this whole unit and I were to fold it, and we'll make a crease, and so when I unfold it, I have two parts. So one part would be represented what fraction? It would be the fraction 1/2, right? So I've folded this into halves. And so now let's see, if I were to fold it back, I want you to imagine how many parts, if I were to fold the half again, how many parts when I unfold it, how many equal parts will I have? What's your number? Take a guess. How many numbers or how many parts are going to have? You made your guess? Let's see what we got. There's 2. Is that all of them? We actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. So now, what fraction is represented on this whole unit? We have the fraction fourths. So we have 1/4, we have a fourth here, we have 1/4 here, we have 1/4 here. So when we're looking at a number line is very similar to this. So let's look at, I have up here behind me, I have 2 number lines. And so let's imagine that this is a number line. Now quickly let's review what we already know about a number line. We have a number line, we have arrows go this way, we have an arrow going this way. So we know that a number line goes on forever and it can go backwards forever. There's really no starting point, there's no ending point. They go on forever. But when we look at a number line, we're actually zooming in on a certain set of numbers to see what exactly is in that set that we're looking at. So I've drawn lines here to show what numbers we're going to be looking at. And we've used number lines for rounding, we've used number lines for skip counting, we've used number lines for a lot of things, but we're now going to be able to use number lines to help us with fractions. And so let's look at this part right here. Let's say that this whole section right here is our one whole unit. So let's imagine, just like I did with the sheet of paper, if I were to fold it into halves, where would I put my middle point? Just like when I folded this paper, I folded it down the middle. I folded it right down the middle, which is right here. So if I'm looking at my number line, where am I going to draw my middle? My middle is going to be right about here. You agree? So does this part on this, from this side to this number line and this side of here, are these 2 equal parts? And they are. So when we're looking at this fraction here, if I'm going to start here, let's say this is 0. Let's say I'm starting at 0 and this is 1. So I have one whole unit. So if this were my middle point from 0 to 1, here's my whole unit, and I folded it here, what would be my fraction? First of all, we got to think about how many equal parts do we have. Let's look at our bottom number. Our bottom number is going to tell us how many equal parts. So how many equal parts do I have on this section of the number line? I have 2, right? So my denominator is going to be 2. So from 0 to this point right here, how many of those 2 parts did I cover? So if I'm starting with 0, let's say I'm racing, let's say I'm running, and I'm starting here at 0, and I start running, and I stop right here. How much of the race, or if this is my finish line, how much did I finish? I got halfway through, right? I covered 1 part out of the 2. I covered 1 part out of the 2. And so if I were to continue to run and I would get to the 1, I would be finished. I would be finished with one whole race. And so now let's look at another number line. Let's look at another number line. And so this number line, we're still going to have our starting point at 0, our ending point at 1. This is our one whole unit. Not a circle that you saw over here, not a whole set, but we have a whole unit. That's what we're going to call this. We're going to call this one whole unit. Okay, a unit of measurement. So we're going from 0 to 1 is our unit of measurement. So I'm going to draw my half line right here. And this is going to be my fraction 1/2. So I'm starting here. There's one part I've covered, and that would be my other half. So now let's go back to our piece of paper. And so when I have my piece of paper, I folded it in half, right? And then when I folded it in half again, I'm going to have a total of 4 parts. So now let's look at each, just like we looked at this part as a half, I'm going to fold the half in half. And when I fold the half in half, let's look right here. If I'm just looking from this point this way, about where's the halfway mark? Where would you put the halfway mark? The half of a half would be about right here. Okay? So halfway from 0 to a half, 1/2 is about right here. So now let's say this is our starting point, and this is our end point. Where would my halfway point be here? So half of this half would be right here. About right. Okay? So now let's look at which fraction each of these lines right here, this line here, this mark on the number line, and this mark here, what fraction would that be? First of all, we got to think about what do we know about fractions. Okay? Now we're looking at how many equal parts do we have. From 0 to 1, how many parts do we have? So I'm going to use my blue marker here to show how many we have. So let's see, this was, count with me, 1, 2, 3, 4. So how many parts do I have? I have a total of 4 parts. So my fraction, my denominator, is now going to be here 4, because I've now divided it into 4 parts. Before I had 2 parts. Now I have 4 parts. And so with this fraction, now I'm counting. Now what number was I on this one? When I went from here to here, what was that? What number was I? You remember? If you don't remember, rewind it and let's look at it. So what number was it when I went from here to here? I counted number 1. Okay? So I went, so this is one part of my 4 that I'm going to count. Now what part was this one? This one was 1. What is this one? This one's 2. So we could also say, I'm going to circle this one, we could also say that this fraction can also be the same thing as 2 fourths. 1, 2, because we're not done yet, because we're going to get down here to be 4. And so this next one, we've divided into 4 parts. This one's going to be also going to be 4, because this is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is our third piece of our 4 pieces. And then our last one we have is 1 whole unit, but there's another way of saying 1 whole unit. How many, again, how many pieces do we have? I'm going to circle 1 here. How many pieces do we have? We had 4 pieces. And so what number was this one? This was 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 fourths, which is the same thing as 1 whole unit. So this is the beginning of looking at fractions on the number line. And if you need to watch this, you need to see it again, make sure you rewind it, watch it again.